make flutes. We could make little flutes. Yes, we could make flutes from, and we can still make flutes. We use sambucus, elderberry bushes. We have elderberry bushes growing along the ditch banks, and they could be cut, double joint, clean it down, and you can make very nice flutes out of elderberry. In fact, the Indians of California here, and you have several species of elderberry growing here in California, we're making flutes of that. And the elderberry makes a beautiful, voluptuously lovely, breathy tone. And Jim French has been making elderberry flutes. And he says that Sambucus nigra, which actually came from Europe and was brought over, has a slightly thicker wall and is somewhat better for making elderberry flutes. And so I am going to get Sambucus nigra, 3 bushes from Park Seed Company, I believe it is. And they will deliver them when it cools off, and I'll plant them up there and there.
What do you remember as your first attempts to create a scale of your own? I mean,
when I was very young, but old enough to take piano lessons, my parents decided not to give me piano lessons because they'd sent my older brother over to study piano with Sister Irene Martineau. And he learned how to play the hymns and stuff, and I enjoyed very much what he was playing. And it sounded particularly well on that reed cup organ that we had installed up there. And when I'd go to sleep on the porch, and I would hear what he was playing, and it was so beautiful, just going off to sleep. This reed harmonium, but we just call it a pump organ, plays little melodies, and I realized that the kind of ecstasy created with music was the same kind of ecstasy that I felt when masturbating. I mean, they were just one and the same thing. That it was just, I was having an ecstatic experience. And at that point, the difference between the two they hadn't segregated into the different paths. And, oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, let's cut for a second.
But,
yeah, well, let's cut for a second.
I want to reset.
All right.
You want to put that, yeah.
okay.
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 You're rolling, right, Mark? Wilson 2.
Wilson 2.
And my brother Lyman had...
Oh, one more time. You got to do it. I need to get actually you doing it on film.
What's that?
I need to see it on film.
Oh.
Yeah, that's good.
My parents had sent my brother Lyman over to study piano with Sister Irene Martineau. And he had learned all the hymns. He could play them quite well, I thought. But my parents decided he had been a complete failure at music, and so they decided not to give him music lessons. They just said, why wasting money on Irvin? The Lord moves in strange ways. So I was not forced to take piano lessons. My musical psyche was allowed to develop in a very, very natural way.
Yeah, how did that, what path did that take?
But later on, I learned how to play chords. Some of my friends taught me how to play the guitar chords on the piano, just this, and play the melody with the other hands. That was just, if you knew 2 or 3 chords, you could play any melody you wanted.
Right.
So I would just play things that way on the reed organ. And one day, over there at Sunday school, a couple of nice young and good singers, young ladies, Montez Wetton and Hazel Berta Anderson, one of the Anderson girls, got up and sang, "There's an unknown grave in a lonely spot," etc. and so forth, a hymn that I'd never heard before. And it had it was a real tearjerker, but it had a lilting melody, so I went right home and started playing it on the organ, using the same technique, the melody, the chords, etc. And my mother looked at me kind of strangely, says, "Was that the first time you ever heard that song?" And the poor dear was deluded into believing she had a child prodigy on her hands. She said, "Well, maybe I'd better teach him how to read notation." So she just started with the simplest Hanon or whatever little thing you would, da, 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 da. So once she taught me the notations, she figured I would, to read notation. Then she figured I could learn the hymns by myself, and that would be all right. And I thought, well now, if I can read notation, then I can reverse the process and write notation, can't I? And I says, well, let's give it a try, Ervin, and see if it works. And so I would imagine a pitch in my mind's ears and find the note for it and write it down. And find an embedded little childish little melody, but not all that bad considering what Mozart could do with melodies like that. And it went C, D, and E, C, D, E, D, E, not F, F sharp, not F sharp. The F was wrong. It was just wrong. I knew what I wanted. It was somewhere in between F and F sharp. And so my initial attempt at composition was thwarted. Just thwarted. Years and years later, I learned where I was getting that note. It was I was passing through El Paso. When I got to the train station in El Paso, they were having a great big wedding party in there. A girl from down around the colonies was getting married to a fairly wealthy young man up there in El Paso, and the people in there at the train station were just dressed to the teeth, and they had mariachis. And I went out at the station waiting for Sonia to come pick me up. As I was waiting there, and it was late at night, the train was late as usual, a couple of the mariachis came out, and one of them was showing the other one how to make the riff. But he was like in a C major scale, let us say, and playing a melody that went from C to B went C, B, A, G. and then F to produce that subdominant chord on F, A, C. The B was the 11th harmonic of the F somehow or other. I haven't checked the valving and that, and it wouldn't have been in that key, but I realized that the trumpet was playing that same, from the key of F, was playing the same note that I wanted and couldn't get. It was from the early trumpet music that was instilled in the culture, where you would play this harmonic F anytime you wanted to. You didn't censor it out. That's where I was, it was throughout all Mexican music there. There's a very nice scale I like that does that. Now that I know where it came from, it's not so mysterious to me, and it's very clearly I can just take and put it in there in a lot of Mexican melodies, and it just works.
And it's an 11?
The 11th harmonic is embedded right in the folks music down there. Coming right off the 11th harmonic on the trumpet, which they can't be bothered censoring out because that's what they want to hear anyway. It's that neutral sound that you get on the bagpipes, and a lot of bagpipes made it over. Gaita came over to Mexico, and a lot of the early religious chants had early pipes that went with them that were not anywhere near equal. The early church chants had a lot of equal type scales in them because they came from Spain, and you had the Jewish songs, the Mormon songs, the songs from India, all coming through Spain, and all using the neutral tones.
So, you growing up in a less, well, you said in a more natural way, meaning you didn't have a lot of TV or radios or...
No TV, no radio. And I wasn't born in a hospital with the nude music. You know, you get in the hospital, they play this incessant god-awful music. And the child is indoctrinated before it even, the first sound it hears is these unnatural music.
So you were aware that there was something you wanted to hear that wasn't there.
I knew that neither F nor F sharp was the right note. I knew exactly where that note should be.
Right. Well, see, but millions of kids grow up thinking that's where the F and the F sharp should be. You, having grown up where you hadn't heard a lot of 12 equal music, suddenly were conscious of what you were hearing.
The hymns were sort of 12ish. They certainly, the piano was never tuned to the 11th harmonic, but still I could hear the 11th harmonic. And that's because my friend Eduardo Montes, son of Margarita Montes and her husband Chapo, or Don Alvino Montes. He, at one point, several years ago, was hopelessly in love with the girl that was just wrong for him. Wrong. And he started writing little love songs to her. He just had them in his ear, and I asked him to sing them for me, on the truck going up there. He sang a couple of them, and he sang in a scale that I never heard before or since. But when up there, when he would pass the house, sometimes he would be whistling a tune, and I listened to what he's whistling, and I have a 31 tone set and put it in 31. It would fit fairly good in 31. And Fokker was right. You can do these neutral intervals in 31, and they sound pretty good. So I was able to pick his melodies out of 31, but not out of 12.
So
Okay,
when did
Gary, can we just do put a clap that thing and you accidentally did it?
Oh.
So we're out of sync. So.
you want to?
Who's your question?
All right.
And then we should put our camera on. So go ahead.
Okay. You got that? Huh? Wilson 3. So, you grew up, left your own devices. When did you start to, what was your first exposure, direct exposure to 12 equal in an educational situation? In other words, when did you...
Okay, when I was about 15, we moved to Oregon. And I didn't get any music lessons there, but I was unhappy in Oregon. And I would work in the mint fields and so forth, and Dad bought a piano for $50 at Portland. A nice little upright piano. And so I bought little books to learn how to play the piano, and I was just buying all of the popular songs of the day. You know, Don't Fence Me In, you know. all the songs that back in those days were just
About 1943, was it?
somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And going across the river into Kelso and Longview, Washington, and picking up sheet music and learning how to, and a lot of them just had chords. You just played the chords, and then it gave the melody line there. And I learned those. And so that was my first exposure to equal training in equal piano music. But it was very shortly, well, I became unhappy there.
Yeah, I wanted to know what was the unhappiness about.
Well, I know you want to know. Let us say I became unhappy.
Okay.
I had always been unhappy, and that wasn't the first time I'd tried to run away from home. But this time I realized I could in fact successfully do that. I went down to Oakland,
Oh.
where I heard I could work in the shipyards. Got there, and it turned out I wasn't old enough to work in the shipyards. And, well, one thing led to another. I was waiting in the bus for a trip somewhere else. Maybe I think I was going to Los Angeles, and the police came around and wanted to know where I was going and wanted to see my ticket. And they asked me how old I was, and I told them they thought maybe I was a draft dodge or something. And he says, well, you're a truant child. I mean, you're a runaway child, and we're going to have to put you in jail until you cooperate with us and tell us where you're from. And so they left me in jail there, and they just left me stuck in jail there. And just after several days, they called me and they said, we decided to ship you back to Mexico. Because I told them I was from Mexico.
I see.
And that I was this is, oh, I'm from Oregon. and by folks, you're so and so and so and so. And so my mother got on the line and called one of my aunts who lived right there nearby and told her to come and get me. And she came and got me. And took care of me for a while, and then she sent me back to Rainier, Oregon. And my mother, seeing that I was going to be a real problem, decided to send me to Utah, where my Aunt Emily lived, on the McDonald side of the family, Aunt Emily McDonald. because Aunt Emily McDonald was good with disciplining children and keeping them under control. Mother just felt that she didn't have me under control, which obviously she didn't, no fault of hers. I had a little problem with my father. It just couldn't be helped. Poor man was just unsuccessful. And no matter how hard he had worked, anyway, I went back to study with Aunt Emily, and she and my cousin Isabel, Emily Carlisle, my cousin Isabel, was there, and she was just an intelligent and charming and beautiful redhead. And she was studying music with Mrs. Perkins, piano music. And it was decided that I would go study music with Mrs. Perkins.
You were how old at this time? 16, 15, 16?
I was still in high school. I had taken 1 year of high school in Mexico, gone up and taken about a year of high school in Oregon, which was very nice. And then, which I enjoyed because I had some good teachers in Oregon. They taught me English, and that's where I first heard the albatross. And a good mathematics teacher, and she taught me some real good algebra.
Algebra.
And I was getting good grades, really good grades in algebra. And I respected her, and she respected me. And we got along just fine. But then my mother decided, he's maybe Aunt Emily should. So I went over and was studying with I stayed at Aunt Emily's, and Isabel told me, she says, well, changing keys is easily. All you do is go around this cycle of fifths. I didn't know there was such a thing as a cycle of fifths. I really didn't. Once I heard that there was a cycle of fifths, it just opened a whole doorway. Just the whole universe opened before me. But I would go over and study with Mrs. Perkins. And I played a few little things using that chord technique, and Mrs. Perkins was just appalled, and so she gave me some little etudes to study, just simple little things that I could learn how to play, and go home and play something when I went to Sunday school that would satisfy the requirements of doing something for Sunday school. And Aunt Emily would go out back. We had a chicken, and instead of paying, we didn't have money, she'd kill a chicken and pull up some carrots and cabbages and things. I'd take a little package of food over to Mrs. Perkins and lay them on her. And so I got to study some quite nice things with Mrs. Perkins. And she was amazed how fast I learned. I mean, she says several times over. She was amazed at how rapidly I learned. Well, she didn't realize that I had all of this ear training, that I could hear things. Well, but all I had up to that point, really, of theoretical information was that, and Isabel was playing all the great classics, all of the great masters, reading Bach, Handel, Buxtehude, and defies. And she belonged to the McDowell Club. Believe it or not. So at that point, I was getting on. I went back, by that time I was getting close to 18. I went back home for the summer. The second I was 18, I went up to Portland to enlist. I was going to enlist in the Navy. The Navy place was closed, so I went across the street to the Air Force place, and they were open, and I joined the Air Force. And they gave me a physical on the spot, and gave me my tests and things, and I noticed as we were about, after I finished the test, I was just sitting out there in the main room, and one of the officers was pointing at me, and another officer was looking at me, you know, so I didn't find out until later that on the one test, which required the rotation of images and saying this image is like this image, you take this image and do strange things, inverted, and I just, it took me just a few minutes to figure out a routine where I could trace them down, and what I did was intellectually cheated, but I answered the question correctly. The guy was telling his commanding officer that I got a perfect score on that test, and evidently I was the first person ever to go through there to get a first perfect score on spatial visualization.
That's important.
Which I didn't realize at the time that everybody else didn't have the ability to visualize spatially the way I did. At any rate, I went on into the service, just happy as could be, and got over to Japan. By a fluke, what we did is I was over in Rainier, Oregon. I enrolled and we went up up by Seattle to an air base up there, and they put us through some initial, gave us uniforms and duffel bags and things like that, and put us on a train, and we went on the train all the way down through Los Angeles, and all the way through El Paso, and all the way to San Antonio, Texas. And there was a Air Force training place down there, and went over there, and I was in the Air Force there, but we would go into San Antonio, and down by the banks there's a little place there where they would play jazz. And not only did they play jazz, it was just good jazz.
I heard good jazz in San Antonio too.
Did you now? I crossed the alley from the alley. Anita O'Day.
Yeah.
Key Largo. Strange Cargo.
Yeah.
I wandered the way. At any rate, so then we were all set up there, and I ended up, but in the barracks there was a bunch of kids from North Carolina, and they would always tune up North Carolina bluegrass. It wasn't country. It was hillbilly music. They would always tune it in, and we were getting some very, very good hillbilly music coming through. And I would go to the radio and pick something out. They say, "Oh, that's not the right thing to listen to. It's been citified." We went over to Tokyo, finally by the flute that I had in school up in Rainier, Oregon. I had played the tuba and the drums and so forth, and we had gone on to an encampment near Tokyo there, where they had all of these little huts with heater in them, and two guys slept inside of a little pup tent that it was called. And they had us all out and ready to ship us to Korea. And somebody